Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Liam and I'm a British polyglot who can speak 7 languages. In this video, I want to be talking about learning different languages at the same time. How do you learn different languages at the same time? Is it something recommended? And should you learn multiple languages at the same time? This is a question which is kind of debated. Some polyglots will say yes, definitely learn multiple languages at the same time. It's totally beneficial. And other polyglots may advise you away from it. Maybe they've had bad experiences with learning multiple languages simultaneously. And yeah, personally myself, as a polyglot who's learned 7 languages, and I learned all of these languages in 2 to 3 years, I can say that it's definitely possible to learn multiple languages at the same time, and whether it's easy or not, or whether you should do it, depends on a variety of different factors and you yourself as an individual. In this video, I want to talk about my personal experience with learning multiple languages at the same time, and if you're planning to start your language learning journey, if you're wanting to become a polyglot or learn 2 or more languages at the same time, this video is going to help you and I will provide you with the tips and advice you need to start your language learning journey. Let's go. Now, everyone always says the second foreign language is easier than the first, and the more languages you learn, the easier it gets. While this may be partially true in terms of that when you learn multiple languages, you gain more experience in language learning and you kind of find the right methods and you find your preferred learning techniques and you get better at learning vocabulary and you get better at learning pronunciation. However, you kind of have to consider language families as well. So while that statement may be true in some respect, in other respects it's not true. And that brings me to my first point, which is consider which languages you're going to learn. When you're learning 2 languages at the same time, there are several things you may want to consider. For example, the similarities between those 2 languages and the similarities they have with your native language. As a general rule, it's better to learn languages which are not from the same language family. I know some people, and I thought this as well, you may be thinking, surely you should learn 2 languages which are from the same language family, 2 languages which are similar, because it's less effort for your brain, right? And yeah, while that may be true, you've also got more chance of confusing the 2 languages, and that could get really, really complicated. Because yeah, it's the most annoying thing when you forget the word in one language or you confuse languages and you accidentally speak one but not the other. And I know I definitely felt this problem because I decided to learn Spanish and then a few months later I decided to learn French, and I was learning these 2 languages simultaneously. And I was constantly confusing Spanish and French with each other, the vocabulary and everything, and my brain just couldn't handle that and it got really confused. So generally, I mean, you don't have to follow this rule, but it would be a good idea to learn 2 languages which are different from one another. And also, what I can say is don't start learning 2 new languages on the same day. I speak 7 languages, and generally, I know when I'm ready to start a new language, and I generally decide to learn a new language once I reach a basic conversational level in the other language. So for example, I could reach the B1 or B2 level in that language, and then I decide, okay, I'm ready to start learning a new one. But never ever would I decide to learn 2 languages on the same day, because that would just be so confusing for my brain, and I wouldn't be able to handle that. So consider getting a good and decent level in one language before moving on to the next one, and then you can kind of integrate that other language into your language learning schedule if you have one. Personally, I'm not a big fan of having schedules and certain timetables that like, oh, at this time on this day I'm going to learn this language and then this language. No, I don't find that works for me. I find it easier to be more spontaneous in language learning. I mean, obviously you're going to need some sort of time management because otherwise you're just going to completely confuse yourself and your brain as well. So if you're planning to have some kind of timetable, I would recommend, if you're learning two languages at the same time, I wouldn't recommend alternating days. On Monday you learn this language, on Tuesday you learn the other language, on Wednesday you go back to the language you were learning on Monday. I'd say that generally you should learn both languages on the same day, as it would be less effort for your brain, and your brain would know how to differentiate between the two languages. If you're wanting to have a set schedule of on Monday you learn this language, Tuesday that language, Wednesday that language, it may not work out that well for you, and your brain may not like you. I'm dead? No. I would say that generally you should aim for about 1 hour a day learning each language. This obviously gets difficult when you get to the point of where you know 5 or 6 languages, and then you can't put an hour a day into each one of those, because that would just take up a huge part of your day, and if you're working or have school, then that's just not going to work on your schedule. But generally an hour a day per language is a good goal. I mean, if you can't achieve that, then obviously it's okay. And if you don't have time to actually sit down to learn a language, sit down on the computer screen, memorize vocabulary, memorize grammar rules, you can still learn a language by integrating it into your daily life. So for example, you could watch films in your target language. You could also go and find some language exchange apps or clubs where you can practice different languages with other people, find friends who speak different languages. There are thousands of ways which you can integrate language learning into your daily life. And if you're learning 2 languages at the same time, then maybe you could set your phone into one language and your computer into the other language, so that way you're training your brain to understand both languages at the same time, and it's not going to be too overwhelming for you. I would also recommend making one language your stronger language. So prioritize or put more time into one language, the one language which you prefer, rather than trying to put an equal amount of time into both languages. This will make your language learning journey more enjoyable. It will avoid confusion between the two languages, and it will make one language your dominant language, and there's going to be the one where you may confuse the other language with that language, but that's completely normal, and that's part of the journey, and the confusion will go away with time. Putting the exact same amount of time into both languages can be difficult, especially if you're more inclined to one language and you want to learn that one more than the other one. If you do find more interest in one language than the other, then I would totally recommend going for that language, and put the other one to the side and don't forget about it. Learn it from time to time, but make sure you have a decent level in that one language before going on to the other one, like I mentioned earlier. It could also be a good idea to have hobbies in which you use the different languages which you speak, and have one hobby for the specific language which you want to learn. So for example, if you're learning Portuguese and German, let's say, then you could, for example, look at the Portuguese cuisine. And if you're interested in cooking and you're learning Portuguese, then you could look at the Portuguese cuisine, you could look at different recipes from Portugal, Brazil, or any other Portuguese-speaking country, and once you reach that level of which you're able to understand a lot of the language, you could try reading the recipes in Portuguese and trying to understand them, and you could it's gonna get you involved in the culture while also learning the language quicker and integrating it into your daily life. If you're interested in learning German, you could look at the German history or German culture. You could look at the Oktoberfest or other traditions which Germany has, because there are loads. And you could study all of that in German. Or if your level in that language is high enough, you can study in your target language as well. I mean, would I recommend this? I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it if you have an exam coming up or if you're studying for school, because I made this mistake. I started studying about geography in German, and then I came up, because I studied all the geographical terms in German, so then I came up to, there was a question in my exam, like name the different parts of the volcano, and I could not, I just kept on thinking, wie sagt man Vorderschlot auf English? And like, I could not think of the English word, and luckily I didn't fail my exams, but I studied in German, and I kind of regret that decision because there were certain terms which I did not know how to say. But also, the most important thing is be prepared for frustration and confusion. Language learning is not an easy journey, especially when you're learning 2 languages or 3 languages, 4 languages at the same time. It can get really confusing and you can get really frustrated with yourself, but you just have to be prepared for that and have the motivation to continue. Motivation is the most important thing in language learning, and if you have motivation, you can definitely learn. You just need to push your way through those difficult areas of language learning. If you're struggling with grammar, you just need to try and push yourself to get through it. Accept the fact that it's confusing, accept the fact that you're finding difficulties, because the more you practice, the better you'll get. If you're feeling confused or frustrated because of the language which you're learning and you cannot understand it, take a break from it. Maybe even learn a different language. If you're learning multiple at the same time, then if you're struggling with one language, take a break from that language and start learning the other one. And then later on, go back to that language when your mind's more fresh, when you're calmed and when you're less frustrated, and try again. And the more you try, the better you'll get. But that concludes this video. I hope my advice and sharing my personal interests and my personal experiences with learning multiple languages at the same time has kind of given you an idea on how to get started. And I hope this video was motivational to you or inspirational, and I hope it helped you. So if you liked this video, then I would appreciate it if you could give the video a like or subscribe to the channel, or check out my Instagram or my website for other language learning tips and advice. And I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.